Good morning. My name is Kyle, and I'm the production content director here at Purpose Church. I'm so glad that you have chosen to join us in worshiping our God today. There is something at our church for everyone, no matter what age or stage. So follow our social media, check out our website, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to let us help you connect with God, connect with others, and connect others with God. Today, we continue our series called Unqualified Yet Chosen, a study on the life of David. But before that, let me tell you a little bit about what's happening at our church. If you are a young adult, come join us for a beach day. Next Saturday, August 24th, we will head on over to Corona Del Mar to play games, have a bonfire, and enjoy each other's company from 3 to 9 p.m. And if you're a young adult like me, you're probably already thinking about what food to pack. But don't worry, the food is on us. All you need to do is show up, ready to hang in the sun with some friends. The best way to register is to head over to our Instagram @PurposeYA to sign up. We can't wait to see you there. As Pastor Glenn heads towards retirement, we invite you to celebrate the Gundersons in a few specific ways. Each Sunday, starting September 8th, Pastor Glenn has prepared a special message for the congregation, so make sure you're here every week. We also have some great events planned to celebrate this season. We have a women's celebration brunch for Kimberly on Saturday, September 21st at 10 a.m. Adult women of the church are encouraged to register for this event and celebrate Kimberly's ministry. On Sunday, September 22nd at 3 p.m., we planned a time for us to encourage and pray for the Gundersons in the worship center, followed by a drink reception. All are welcome. Then, the men in our church can join the monthly Warrior Breakfast with Pastor Glenn being the special guest on Saturday, September 28th at 8 a.m. in the B building. We then top it all off with a celebration Sunday on September 29th. All three services will have identical content with music by our band, choir, and orchestra. We will also have food trucks on campus so that we can fellowship together after worship. For more details about retirement-related activities, go to purposechurch.com/retirement. We look forward to all the ways we can celebrate the Gundersons this season. There are many other ways you can partner with Purpose Church to further God's kingdom. To find these opportunities or to give online, go to purposechurch.com/give. Before we continue to worship, let's pray together. God, thank you for this opportunity that we get to dive into your word once again. And Lord, we just pray that as Pastor Glenn speaks over the life of David with us, that we just hear your word and we can take it to heart throughout this entire week. In your name, amen.
Come on and shout in this place. Come on. Come stand up to your feet. We're going to go to the throne of grace. We're going to worship together. Did anybody want to worship Jesus in this place? I just want to get a temperature check. Awesome. God, we love you. We praise your name. We thank you for another day. God, we ask and we know that your grace is sufficient, Jesus. We ask for your grace today, dear Lord. As we worship you, dear Lord, speak to us through the songs, dear Lord. Speak to us through your presence, Jesus. We love you. We praise your name. Everybody said amen.
There is a river where goodness flows. There is a fountain that drowns sorrows. There is an ocean deeper than fear. The tide is rising, rising. There is a current stirring deep inside. It's overflowing from the heart of God. The flood of heaven crashing over us. The tide is rising, rising. Bursting, bursting up from the ground. We feel it now.
Come on, sing it.
Bursting, bursting up from the ground. We feel it now. We come alive in the river. We come alive in the river. We come alive in the river.
The river of joy.
Well, great to see you, Purpose Church. So good to be together here online. I'm just so happy to be with you and so glad that you've joined us. You know, Kimberly and I were on vacation during the Olympics this year. And so we got to watch a lot of events, especially track and field. And one of the things that just impressed us was how many Jesus followers there were from all over the world. And it was just crazy. Christianity is truly the largest movement in world history, the most widespread in every nook and cranny and culture in the world. And the athletes were actually banned by the Olympics from witnessing to their faith at the Olympics. But they did it anyway. They found all kinds of creative ways to do it. Let me give you some examples from the Fijian rugby team, who started each day with a time of worship in the Olympic Village, to Tsege Duguma from Ethiopia, who after winning the silver medal in the women's 800 meters, stood in front of the camera showing the back of her racing bib that said, "Jesus is Lord." To 16-year-old Brazilian skateboarder, Raisa Leal, who after winning the bronze medal stood on the podium and in sign language signed, "Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life." Perhaps the most iconic picture from the Games was of the Brazilian bronze medalist, surfer Gabriel Medina, competing in Tahiti. He shared this photograph on his Instagram with the biblical quote from Philippians 4:13, "I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me." Now, among the Americans, there was gold medalist Steph Curry, who teammate Andre Iguodala says is the closest example of Jesus Christ that he has ever met. Cole Hocker, who after winning gold in the men's 1,500 meters with an Olympic record, put on his Instagram post simply two words, "God did." And then there's Sydney McLaughlin-Levrone, who is Kimberly's favorite athlete. She has followed her since high school. Kimberly talks about Sydney McLaughlin all the time. She won 2 gold medals and broke her own world record for the 400 hurdles for the 6th time. And she basically gives a Bible study to the media after every race. If you've ever heard her interviewed after a race, it's basically like a devotional that you could use for your quiet time. And I just want you to know, I could go on for the whole message, and I had to discipline myself not to. I could have gone on the whole time. They're just everywhere. And what a great example these are of everyone, everywhere following Jesus. Now, today we're continuing our summer series, Unqualified Yet Chosen, a study in the life of David. And today, our study from the life of David is Offerings That Cost Me Nothing from 2 Samuel chapter 24. We leave 1 Samuel now, and then next Sunday I will wrap up the series with something from 1 Kings as we move into a couple of chapters in 1 Kings after finishing 2 Samuel with chapter 24 today. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever done something and it backfired? Have you ever done something and it backfired? Well, this is one of my favorite stories about something that backfired. It's from Mickey Mantle. He's the one here on our left. His book, his biography, The American Dream Comes to Life. And he's side by side with his best friend from the Yankees, Billy Martin. Mickey Mantle writes, "When Billy Martin was managing the Texas Rangers, he did such a good job that they gave him a new rifle. He wanted to go hunting right away, and so I said, well, I'll take you hunting. I know a guy on a ranch outside San Antonio. He's a doctor and a friend, and I think he'll let us hunt on his ranch. But you'll have to get up at 4 in the morning because it takes hours to drive there." He said, "I don't care. I want to go deer hunting with my new rifle." So we drove down there, and I said, "You wait in the car, and I'll go ask if it's all right for us to go hunting." I went and knocked on the door. The doctor came and said, "Hey, Mick, what are you doing down here?" I said, "I've got Billy Martin out in the car. We were wondering if we could go deer hunting on your ranch." He said, "Oh, sure, anytime." Then he said, "By the way, will you do me a favor? You see that old mule standing by the barn? She's so old and she needs to be put to sleep. Would you shoot that mule for me?" I said. "Oh, Doc, we don't want to shoot your mule. We came to hunt deer." He said, "You'd be doing me a favor because I just don't have the heart. It's almost like a member of the family." I said, "Okay, we'll shoot the mule." As I walked back to the car, I thought, I'm going to pull a joke on Billy. I yanked the car door open and I said, "Give me my rifle." Billy said, "What's the matter?" I said, "We drove 4 hours to go deer hunting and this guy won't let us. I'm going to go shoot his mule." Billy said, "Oh no, don't do that." He was trying to grab the rifle back saying, "We'll get in trouble and go to jail and everything." I said, "Give me the rifle." I finally got it back from him and ran out to the barn. Pow, I shot the mule right in the neck. The mule fell over and then right behind me I hear bam, bam, bam. I turn around and there was Billy with his gun. I said, "Billy, what are you doing?" He says, "I got 3 of his cows as well." Now there's something that backfired. And what we're going to see from David's life is something else that has backfired on him. Principle number 1, rely on God, not status, for security. Verse 1. Again, the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, "Go and take a census of Israel and Judah." Now, in 1 Chronicles chapter 21, there's like a parallel passage to this as well. It tells the same story in 1 Chronicles that it tells here in 2 Samuel. And there it says that Satan rose up against Israel. So from this, we should probably assume that God allowed Satan to tempt David into this sin for the purpose of punishing the nation. It's kind of similar to when God allowed Satan to bring trouble to Job. Now, why were the people of Israel, why did God want to punish them? Well, I believe it's because of the sin of following Absalom when he rebelled against David that Pastor Eric preached on a couple of weeks ago. Now, in that story, we tend to focus on David's sin with Bathsheba that led to Absalom's sin in rebelling against his father. But sometimes we forget that the people sinned by following Absalom in rebellion against God's king, David. So God is going to punish them for doing that. Verse 2, so the king said to Joab and the army commanders with him, and this is something I didn't notice until this week, that it was a group of them that came. It wasn't just Joab, but it was these army commanders that were trying to convince David to do the right thing. The king said, "Go throughout the tribes of Israel from Dan to Beersheba and enroll the fighting men so that I may know how many there are." Now, God throughout the Bible commands his leaders to count the people. I mean, there's a whole book of the Bible called Numbers, all right? One of the 66 books is called Numbers. In the Gospels, for example, we see where Jesus fed 5,000 people, and then later he fed 4,000 people. Then in the book of Acts, it says that 3,000 people were baptized after Peter preached on the day of Pentecost. So God usually, I believe, uses numbers and tells us to count so that we can be encouraged that he's working in and through us. And that's how we like to use numbers here at Purpose Church, to just kind of say, yay, God. God's working. Things are working. He's moving in us and he's moving through us. So why was it wrong this time, as we're going to see, for David to count his military men, count his soldiers? Well, for 2 reasons. Because we see here that David only wants to count the military. It's not all the people, just the military, just the soldiers. And so we believe, number 1, we believe that David's motivation was pride. He wanted to feel prideful about what a great army he led. And then number 2, that David's motivation was security. How large his army was would make him feel more secure. So he's depending on his army for his security and not on God. And he's taking pride in his military strength. And God is against this because he loves us. It's out of love for us. He knows that if we depend on ourselves, it's always going to lead to disappointment. Whenever we depend on the stuff of this life, it always, what does Pastor Eric say? I love that thing he says. He says, never put your trust in something you can lose. I think that's one of his quotes from the last couple of weeks here. Never put your trust in something you can lose, because if you can lose it, it can disappoint you. But put your trust in God, because you can never lose him. God knows, as our Heavenly Father, that the only way to true peace and contentment and happiness and joy is through fully depending on Him. Jeremiah 9, this is what the Lord says: let not the wise boast of their wisdom, or the strong boast of their strength, or the rich boast of their riches. But let the one who boasts boast about this, that they have the understanding to know me, that I am the Lord who exercises kindness, justice, and righteousness on earth. For in these I delight, says the Lord. And so now back to principle number 2. Be open to wise counsel if it comes from a friend. And so David is going to count these. It's going to get them in trouble. His friends try to stop him from doing it. But before we read verse 3, I want to just tell you a crazy story. There's this camp that has meant so much to me. It's really where I got plugged into Jesus as I was a camper at this camp. Eventually I was a counselor, eventually became program director for it. I ran a track and field cross-country camp out of that camp as well. And so it's had a really big part in my life. And it's in the wilderness area of upstate New York. Now, when you think of New York, you don't think of wilderness areas. But actually, I think the biggest wilderness area east of the Mississippi is in upstate New York, near the Canadian border. It's in what's called the Adirondacks. And so this camp is in like the middle of nowhere. It's a wilderness training camp for boys and young men. As a matter of fact, it's funny, our grandson Alejandro went to that camp just this last summer, spent the whole summer there in a leadership training program. And one of the things they had to do was be completely alone for 3 days and fast for 3 days. I think they had water, but no food for 3 days. And he wrote us a letter about it. He says, well, for the first day and a half, I just read God's word. That's all I thought about. He said, but for the second day and a half, all I could think about instead of God's word was Chick-fil-A and Raising Cane's. He said, that's all I thought about for the last couple of days of that experience. So anyway, it's completely in the wilderness, and it's not one of those camps like Hume or Forest Home that there's people there pretty much year-round. This is a camp where it's only in the summer because it's buried by snow in the winter, but just in the summer. And so it is just, when you go there outside of the summer, it's just complete wilderness, nobody near for miles and miles and miles. So after I was ordained as a pastor, I drove up there for the day and had like a supernatural experience with the Lord. And so a number of years ago now, I was speaking at a men's conference in the upstate New York. And it was about an hour from where this camp was. So after I'd finished the weekend speaking, I said, I'm going to go and just walk around it alone, and just be alone with the Lord. And like I said, nobody for miles, utter wilderness, walking around this property. And one of the things that I'd been wrestling with was the thing we're talking about here today. I was always the one in charge of attendance figures and keeping track of them here at our church. That was me. Now, if any of you know me, that's like the fox guarding the chicken house, all right, for me to be in charge of the attendance figures. And I was really, wrestling with the Lord. Should I give this up to somebody else? Should I turn this over to the executive pastor now? Tim McCandless, our chief of operations, he does it now. And I was really just, that had been something I'd been wrestling with that weekend, just, Lord, what do you want me to do? So I'm walking around the camp and I go into the porcupine cabin where a guy named Craig Barnes, who's now the president of Princeton Theological Seminary, Craig and I were the counselors for this cabin full of 10-year-olds years ago in the porcupine cabin. And I just walk into the cabin and this 3x5 card is just sitting on a sideboard next to one of the bunks. It's just a 3x5 card. And it's just sitting there. And what should be the verse on this card but this verse that we're about to read? But Joab said, may the Lord add to his people 100 times as many as they are. Are they not, my lord the king, all of them my lord's servants? Why then should my Lord require this? Why should be a cause of guilt for Israel? And it was glowing and it was floating in the air. And no, that part's not true, but it might as well have been glowing and it might as well have been floating in the air. I couldn't believe it. It was utterly random. I mean, nobody has, I could see, a counselor having a verse like the one we just read from Jeremiah or one of the other favorite devotional books, but this is random Old Testament stuff. And I grabbed this card and I said, Lord, got it. Went right home, took my hands off the attendance numbers, gave it over to the executive pastor and to our chief of operations, and really felt like the Lord had spoken to me. So that was the First Chronicles version of it. Here's the Second Samuel version of that verse. But Joab replied to the king, may the Lord your God multiply the troops 100 times over, and may the eyes of the Lord the king see it. But why does my lord the king want to do such a thing? Principle number 2 again, be open to wise counsel if it comes from a friend. Now, not all criticism is valid. Some of it comes from people who just want to put you down. I love what Pastor Eric says. He says that you should only receive criticism from someone you would ask advice from. That is like such a good line. And Joab was a friend of David, at least at this point in David's life. Now, we're going to see next Sunday, where Joab was not a friend of David's next Sunday. But at this point in David's life, he's a friend, and David should have been open to his wise counsel, but he was not. It says in verse 4, the king's word, however, overruled Joab and the army commanders, so they left the presence of the king to enroll the fighting men of Israel. Principle number 3, when your conscience strikes, run to God, not away from him. Verse 5, after crossing the Jordan, they camped near Aroer, south of the town in the gorge, and then went through Gad and on to Jazer. They went to Gilead in the region of Tahim Hadshi and on to Dan Jaon and around toward Sidon. Then they went toward the fortress of Tyre and all the towns of the Hivites and Canaanites. Finally, they went on to Beersheba in the Negev of Judah. After they had gone through the entire land, they came back to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. Joab reported the number of the fighting men to the king. In Israel, there were 800,000 able-bodied men who could handle a sword, and in Judah, 500,000. And for just a moment, David feels proud. And for just a moment, David feels secure. And then, verse 10, David was conscience-stricken after he had counted the fighting men. And he said to the Lord, I have sinned greatly in what I've done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing. Now, David is forgiven. He's in heaven today. But there are still consequences to sin. God forgives our sin, but there are still consequences to it. Principle number 4, when you discover that you have done wrong, fall into the Lord's great mercy. Verse 11, before David got up the next morning, the word of the Lord had come to Gad, the prophet, David's seer. Go and tell David, this is what the Lord says. I am giving you 3 options. Choose one of them for me to carry out against you. So Gad went to David and said to him, shall there come on you 3 years of famine in your land? Or 3 months of fleeing from your enemies while they pursue you? Or 3 days of plague in your land? Now then, think it over and decide how I should answer the one who sent me. That is one of the most terrible verses in all the Bible. That is just awful. My goodness. But, it reminds us to take God seriously. Obedience is a big deal to God. Now, this sounds harsh to our modern ears, but that's because sin is not a big deal to us anymore. But sin is a big deal to God. Now, let's do a poll, okay, for all of you online and for our in-house audience right now. Let's vote which of these 3 you would take. How many of you would take the 3 years of famine? How many of you would take 3 months of fleeing from your enemies? Okay. How many of you would take 3 days of plague? Okay. And I'm not sure all of you out there, everybody here actually voted. Okay. Everybody voted. I think some of you didn't want to vote, you abstained. I have to admit, if I had to pick, I would probably say, 3 years, that's a long time. Remember when you were a kid, you just want to get the punishment over with. So that's kind of a long time. 3 months of fleeing from your enemies. The problem there is that humans in warfare always go overboard. They're violent, they're ruthless, and so maybe not that. 3 days kind of gets it over with. But David had an additional reason for choosing the third option. He says in verse 14, David said to Gad, I am in deep distress. Oh, I bet he was. Let us fall into the hands of the Lord, for his mercy is great. But do not let me fall into human hands. So the Lord sent a plague on Israel from that morning until the end of the time designated, and 70,000 of the people from Dan to Beersheba died. Now that's about, we're not sure exactly, but that's probably about 1 out of every 100 of the people in Israel, maybe 1 out of every 50. So we're talking 1 to 2%. Now, I don't know if I like to believe this because it just makes me feel better about this whole story, but possibly these were the main people who rebelled against the Lord and against David by following Absalom. Maybe I'm just trying to make my modern self feel better about this judgment, but possibly that is what is going on. It says in verse 16, when the angel stretched out his hand to destroy Jerusalem, the Lord relented. David was right. God's like a father who's punishing and intends to do one punishment, just can't go through with the whole thing because he's a loving heavenly dad. He's a loving heavenly parent. And so it says he got partway through the punishment and he relented concerning the disaster and said to the angel who was afflicting the people, enough, withdraw your hand. The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Araunah, the Jebusite. We see here in this story God's justice, but we also see his grace. Then principle number 5, take responsibility for your actions. Despite all David's failures, this is why we call him, as we did a few weeks ago, a man after God's own heart. Despite all of his sin, all of his mistakes, this is the reason, because he always took responsibility. Verse 17, when David saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to the Lord, I have sinned. I, the shepherd, have done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall on me and on my family. You see, David is the opposite of Jesus. Even though David is sometimes seen as a picture of Jesus, in this case, he's the picture of the opposite of Jesus. He's the opposite of Jesus, the great shepherd. David, Israel's shepherd, sinned, and the people paid the price. See that? The shepherd sinned, the people paid the price. And there are times when a pastor sins, and the people, the church, pay the price for that. But with Jesus, the great shepherd, we sinned, and Jesus, the great shepherd, paid the price. Just the opposite of what's going on here. And now the main point to this chapter, and I want to spend the remainder of our time here. Number 6, principle number 6, don't give God offerings that cost you nothing. Picking it up with verse 18. On that day, Gad went to David and said to him, go up and build an altar to the Lord on the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. So David went up as the Lord had commanded through Gad. When Araunah looked and saw the king and his officials coming toward him, he went out and bowed down before the king with his face to the ground. Araunah said, why has my lord the king come to his servant to buy your threshing floor? David answered, so I can build an altar to the Lord, that the plague on the people may be stopped. Araunah said to David, let my lord the king take whatever he wishes and offer it up. Here are oxen for the burnt offering, and here are threshing sledges and ox yokes for the wood. Your majesty, Araunah gives all of this to the king for free. Araunah also said to him, may the Lord your God accept you. But the king replied to Araunah, no, I insist on paying you for it. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God, burnt offerings that cost me nothing. Let's just repeat that out loud together. You online and those here out loud together. I will not sacrifice to the Lord my God burnt offerings that cost me nothing. What I'm about to share may be the most important thing that I share with you before I retire as your lead pastor in 6 weeks. And I am in this unique position to do this without any perceived benefit to myself. I just have this unique opportunity right now where I can do this and there's no perceived like hidden agenda or personal agenda. I'm not sharing this because your giving goes to pay my salary, because that will not be the case after 6 weeks. I'm not sharing this because your giving goes to support any dreams that I might have for Purpose Church and its ministries and outreach in the future. I'm sharing what I'm going to share for the next few minutes as a brother in Christ who has found it to be one of the most important lessons in the Christian life. I found it the difference between an ordinary walk with Christ and an extraordinary walk with Christ. A dull walk with Christ and an adventurous walk with Christ. I found it to be the difference between a moderately blessed Christian life and a greatly blessed Christian life. I've discovered it to be the difference between Jesus using you some and Jesus using you greatly. I want to share with you 13 verses that will change your life and your journey for Jesus. Matthew 6, verse 19. Jesus said, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." You know, Jesus talked about two subjects more than any other: hell and money. Do you know that? Two biggest subjects of Jesus: hell and money. He talked about hell because he cares about our eternity. He talked about money because he cares about our priorities. Hell because he cares about our eternity. Money because he cares about our priorities. He knew that how we prioritize our money is how we prioritize our lives. If God is first in your money, he'll be first in your life. Verse 33, Jesus goes on to say, "But seek first God's kingdom, and his righteousness, and all these other things will be given to you as well." He goes on in Proverbs, the Bible says, 3, verses 9 and 10, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits, the first of all of your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine." Now, that doesn't mean that you'll be rich, but it does mean that God will channel your desires so that you will be content. It doesn't mean you're going to be rich, but it means that He'll channel your desires so that you'll be content. You know, it's ironic that we are the wealthiest people in the history of the world, and yet Satan has tricked us into feeling like we are poor. He's tricked our whole nation into making us think that we're poor. We're like the little rich boy who was going to a new school, and his parents said, "Now look, whatever happens, don't let them know you're rich. Just keep that a secret, okay? They'll treat you differently and stuff like that. They'll expect things of you, so don't let them know that you're rich." And so the little boy sat down. Teacher gave an assignment. It says, "Write a little essay on your family. Tell us about your family." So the little boy sat down. He wrote down. He says, "My father is poor. My mother is poor. I am poor. My brother is poor. My sister is poor. Our maid is poor. Our butler is poor. The pilot of our private jet is very, very poor." Well, Satan is trying to trick us to think we're poor. And what's interesting, research has shown that people are giving away less today than they've done in past years. People are giving away less. So theoretically, we should have more disposable income because we're keeping more for ourselves. And yet, in spite of that, we feel more poor and discontented than ever. Malachi chapter 3, the prophet says, or God says here, will a mere mortal rob God? Yet you rob me. But you ask, how are we robbing you? In tithes and offerings. You are under a curse, your whole nation, because you are robbing me. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, that there may be food in my house. Test me in this, says the Lord Almighty, and see if I will not throw open the floodgates of heaven and pour out so much blessing that there will not be room enough to store it. Now, again, you won't necessarily be rich, but your physical needs will be met, and you'll be blessed spiritually and emotionally and with contentment and in your relationships and in your impact for eternity. It says here, the tithe. I just saw research of the other day that found that 58% of Christians don't know what a tithe is. 58%. Now, that's not the Christian's fault. That's the pastor's fault. A tithe is the first 10% of your income given to God before anything else. When Kimberly and I got married, we both came from homes where tithing was practiced and taught. And so when Kimberly and I first got married, my income was $1,000 a month. So I knew she didn't marry me for my money. I knew that. Kimberly says she didn't marry me for the money, but she stays with me for the money. That's what she says now. So making $1,000 a month, that was my first income. That was our total family household income. So we gave God $100 at the beginning of each month, which seems insane. You're making $1,000 a month, you give away God $100 to begin with. But we miraculously discovered that $900 a month with God's blessing went further than $1,000 a month without God's blessing. So we kept doing it. And we have just felt God's hand of blessing on us and our family for the past 41 years. Somewhat financially, but in all other areas as well. We've just kind of felt the spiritual wind at our back for the last 41 years. You know, parents, I would encourage you to teach your children to tithe at an early age. It is so much easier if you start doing it early. It's painful if you start late. Still need to do it, but it's harder. I began to tithe when I was a child, making 35 cents a week. So I would give God a nickel each week. Now, my math skills weren't very good, so I didn't realize that I was over tithing at that point, a seventh, not a tenth. But because I'd done it when I earned 35 cents a week, it was just natural to do it as my income increased through the years. It's so hard to start tithing later in life, but so easy to start as a child. Now, if it seems impossible to start with a tithe, maybe start with 5% or even 1%. And give God that systematically on a regular basis. And each year that you don't go broke, increase it by 1% until you get to the full tithe. So just start out with 1 or 5. If you don't go broke, increase it to 2%. Don't go broke that year, increase it to 3. But start somewhere and start doing so systematically. That is why God says, test me in this. He says, you know, what I would say is, and I don't believe, you know, some pastors would say, oh, you're preaching partial obedience. I don't believe that. I believe in everything in the Christian life. It's like a muscle. You gradually got to build it up. So I say, start somewhere and test him in this. And if you find God faithful, which I believe you will, then increase it over time, like building a muscle over time. And then I actually believe that the storehouse mentioned here in the Old Testament is the local church in the New Testament, because that's what we find in the early church. Paul wrote to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians 16. He says, now about the collection for the Lord's people, do what I told the Galatian churches to do. On the first day of the week, that's a Sunday, each one of you should set aside a sum of money in keeping with your income. Okay, see, there's a tithe. It's in keeping with your income. It's not equal amounts. It's equal sacrifice. Offerings that cost me something. So it's not equal amounts. It's not the amount. It's a sacrifice involved in it. A sum of money in keeping with your income, saving it up so that when I come, no collections will have to be made. Weekly systematic giving, and not just impulse giving. There's a trend today towards what I call impulse giving. All right. You see something online, a need, and you see that and you just send $25 to a GoFundMe or something like that. Impulse giving. And don't get me wrong, there's a place for that. But to put that in the place of systematic giving, it doesn't nearly have the same impact over your lifetime. Here's a retirement example. Kimberly and I, like I said, in 6 weeks, baby, it's judgment day as to how well prepared we are for retirement. And there are 2 types of ways that we prepared for retirement. Down through the 41 years, some of it has been impulse. A friend will say, hey, invest in this, and we'll do that for a little while. Or, hey, buy gold, and maybe we'll get some gold or whatever. We've had these little things through the years. Hey, do this, and we've impulsively done it. That's one approach to retirement. The other is systematically, the government taking from your paycheck. You never even see it. You give it. You never even see it. You have it out, the church here from our retirement program. You never even see it. It's just gone. Or the investments that we've had, which were systematic. You hardly even think about them. It's just there happening behind the scenes. Now, let me ask you a question. Which one of those approaches do you think has better prepared us for retirement? It has been the systematic one, the one we didn't even think about, just kind of going there beneath the scenes. The systematic has way outperformed the impulse. And the same thing is true for your heavenly investment. You might say, man, I sure wish I could give like a rich person. Have you ever thought that? Do you know that if you tithe on the average income in California over a lifetime, you will invest almost $500,000 in God's kingdom by the end of your life. Think how far that goes. People reached for Christ. People helped in the name of Jesus. That is why Kimberly and I will continue to give to Purpose Church, even after we retire, because we believe that systematic giving through the local church over a lifetime is what prepares us and other people for eternity in heaven. Jesus said in Matthew 23, woe to you, teachers of the law and Pharisees, you hypocrites! You give a tenth, a tithe, of your spices, mint, dill, and cumin, but you've neglected the more important matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. You should have practiced the latter without neglecting the former. See, I think that in previous generations, including maybe my own, maybe the emphasis has been on tithing and probably not the emphasis on justice and mercy and faithfulness issues. And so I understand that. In relation to that, some of the younger generations have pushed the pendulum in the other direction and have probably done a better job with justice, mercy, and faithfulness than the older generations have done. But in the process, sometimes we've neglected the tithe. And what Jesus says here, you should have practiced the latter, justice, mercy, and faithfulness, without neglecting the former, which is tithing. Both are ways to honor and to glorify God. Jesus said in Luke 6, give and it will be given to you. A good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be poured into your lap. For with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. 13 verses that will change your life the way it has changed Kimberly and my life. And then principle number 7, God gave us an offering that cost him everything. Picking it up again in verse 24. So David bought the threshing floor and the oxen and paid 50 shekels of silver for them. David built an altar to the Lord there and sacrificed burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. Then the Lord answered his prayer in behalf of the land, and the plague on Israel was stopped. That piece of land that David bought was called Mount Moriah. It was where Abraham had offered Isaac up as a sacrifice to God. It's where Solomon would, in a few years, build his temple. And from this mountain, you can clearly see about a quarter of a mile away, Mount Calvary, where God sacrificed his son so that the plague of our sin would be stopped and forgiven, and so that we could spend eternity with the one who gave the offering that cost him everything. Lord, thanks so much for what you gave us with your son on the cross. Jesus, thank you for giving your life on the cross. And now, out of gratitude to you, help us not to give you offerings that cost us nothing, just not to just kind of the scraps off the table or what might be or might not be left at the end of the month. Lord, help us to give you the first fruits, to give you priority, and even if it involves sacrifice, Lord, even if it involves not driving as nice a car as we'd like to or going on as nice a vacations as we'd like to, help us to give you offerings that cost us something, because the offering you gave us cost you everything. And we pray it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Hey Purpose Church, my name is Tamiko and I am your discipleship and justice pastor. Thanks for being a part of our online community. I invite you to follow our social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and check out our website so you can stay connected to everything happening at Purpose Church. Hope to worship with you again soon.